Why society wants you to be predictable. Zygmunt Bauman, have you ever asked yourself why every time you try to break out of the mold, whether it's quitting your job, rejecting a label, or taking a path that feels more authentic, you're met with friction, confusion, or even subtle resistance? It's as if the world around you, the very fabric of society, is whispering, "No, that's not what you're supposed to do." But what if I told you that this resistance isn't accidental? That society has been carefully constructed to reward your predictability and punish your ambiguity. Today, we're diving deep into a question that touches every part of your life. Why does society want you to be predictable? And to answer that, we have to start by understanding the ideas of one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, Zygmunt Bauman. Bauman argued that we live in what he called liquid modernity, a society where nothing solid seems to last: jobs, identities, values, even relationships. Everything is in motion. But ironically, in this sea of instability, society demands that you remain stable, consistent, and above all predictable. Why? Because predictability is the operating system of control. In a world where institutions are crumbling, values are shifting, and the future is uncertain, the individual becomes the last refuge of order. If we can predict how you'll behave, what you'll buy, who you'll vote for, and how you'll think, then we can manage you. And once you're manageable, you're safe, not for yourself, but for the system.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Are the routines you follow every day truly yours? Or are they performances you've learned to enact because they make you legible to others? Think about it: your job title, your social media bio, your fashion choices, even your opinions. They all serve a function: to reduce the chaos of your identity into something that can be understood, categorized, and, most importantly, marketed to. Society isn't just interested in who you are, it's invested in who you appear to be. Because appearances can be predicted, and predictable people don't disrupt the flow. But let's go deeper. Predictability is not just about social control, it's also about emotional safety. When you act predictably, people know what to expect from you. You become a constant in their chaotic lives. And so, without realizing it, we start to trade our authenticity for acceptance. We become characters in our own lives, reciting lines we didn't write, living plots we didn't choose. And the scariest part, we get really good at it. We begin to confuse stability with truth. But predictability isn't truth, it's repetition. And repetition is often the enemy of self-discovery. Zygmunt Bauman once said, "The truth is that our lives are full of half-lived dreams and unexercised freedoms." That line haunts me, because it suggests that much of what we call normal life is actually a form of existential sleepwalking. We don't explore who we could be because we're too busy being who we think we're supposed to be. And society rewards us for it with likes, promotions, compliments, and a sense of belonging. But here's the dark trade-off. We get comfort, but we lose mystery. We gain approval, but we lose ourselves. Let me ask you something that might change the way you see your life. When was the last time you did something truly unpredictable, something that even surprised you? If your answer is "I don't remember," then you may be more entangled in the machinery of predictability than you realize. And that's okay, because awareness is the first step toward liberation. That's why we're here. In this video, we're not just talking about philosophy for the sake of sounding deep. We're talking about reclaiming your life. How? about recognizing the invisible systems that shape your choices, about asking questions that are dangerous. Questions like, what if I stopped being predictable? What if I became a mystery to the world and to myself? These aren't rhetorical. These are invitations. The truth is, society doesn't want you to ask these questions. It wants you to stay in your lane, fulfill your role, and contribute to the smooth operation of the system. Because if too many people start questioning their roles, the whole thing starts to shake. But maybe that's exactly what we need. Maybe we need more shaking, more disruption, more beautiful, courageous unpredictability. Bauman believed that the modern world had liquefied everything: traditions, structures, roles, and left individuals floating in a sea of uncertainty. But instead of teaching us to swim, society hands us anchors, predictable jobs, predictable identities, predictable futures. It tells us, hold on to this, and you'll be safe. But what if safety is the enemy of growth? What if the real truth is found in the unknown? So the next time you feel that urge to break routine, to question a belief, to act in a way that doesn't quite fit the script, don't suppress it. That's not chaos. That's your soul trying to breathe. That's your real self knocking on the door of your predictability, asking to be let in. The architecture of control, how predictability becomes a tool for power. Let's walk a little further into the labyrinth. If in part one we uncovered that predictability isn't just encouraged but manufactured, then now we need to ask, who benefits from your predictability? Because in a world where every action, preference, and decision you make can be tracked, recorded, and analyzed, predictability becomes more than just a social comfort. It becomes currency, and someone is cashing in on it. Your habits are not just private quirks anymore. They are data points in a vast, invisible architecture of control. We live in a system that doesn't just observe behavior, it anticipates it. And when your behavior can be anticipated, it can be influenced. That's the real game. Think about algorithms, recommendation systems, credit scores, targeted ads, political campaigns. These aren't neutral technologies. They are systems that rely on your past behavior to predict your future choices. And once your future can be predicted, it can be shaped. You think you're choosing freely, but in reality you're being nudged subtly, continuously toward behaviors that fit the model. But your predictability is profitable. It's what allows companies to sell you products before you even realize you need them. It's what enables governments to anticipate dissent before it ever becomes public. Predictability is not just a preference, it's a system of power. This is where Bauman's critique becomes chilling. He argued that in liquid modernity, power no longer needs to be overt or violent. It doesn't need to coerce you. It simply needs to make you predictable. Because once you're predictable, you're manageable. And once you're manageable, you're harmless. The new form of control isn't the iron fist, it's the velvet glove. It doesn't punish you for stepping out of line, it makes sure you never want to leave the line in the first place. It rewards conformity so consistently, so subtly, that rebellion becomes unthinkable, not because you're afraid, but because you've forgotten how to imagine anything else. Let's take a step back. Why does this matter philosophically? Because the ability to act freely, to surprise yourself, to choose unpredictably, is at the core of what it means to be human. Predictability erodes that. It fragments your autonomy into patterns. And the more patterns you follow, the more invisible the cage becomes. You don't feel controlled. You feel normal. But ask yourself, is normal always good? Or is it just familiar? Let me give you a concrete example. Think about your morning routine. Maybe you wake up, check your phone, drink the same coffee, take the same route to work. Now imagine that every single part of that routine is logged, measured, and used to build a profile of who you are. That profile is then used to serve you ads, to determine your insurance rate, to evaluate your creditworthiness, even to assess your job candidacy. You are being turned into a pattern, and that pattern becomes more real to the system than you are. You become a simulation of yourself, a digital echo, and that echo is what the world responds to. Not your soul, not your spontaneity, just the data. Bauman warned us about this. He said that in a liquid world, the solid structures that once gave meaning, religion, nation, community, have dissolved. And into that vacuum, the system inserts new forms of control, consumerism, surveillance, bureaucracy. But these don't tell you how to live explicitly. They simply shape the conditions under which certain choices become easier, more rewarded, and more acceptable. And so you drift not because you're lazy or apathetic, but because the architecture around you is designed to guide your drift in predictable ways. You are free to move, but only within the boundaries of the system's expectations. And here's the twist: the more predictable you become, the more the system trusts you. You get perks, you get speed, you get convenience. But all of that comes at a cost. You slowly lose the capacity for unpredictability. You forget how to choose something that isn't already optimized for you. You lose your taste for risk. You become a consumer of your own life rather than its author. Let me ask you a dangerous question. What would your life look like if you made a choice today that no algorithm could have predicted? Not a rebellious act for the sake of rebellion, but a real, soul-driven decision. Something irrational, something wild, something deeply you. How would the system respond? Would it resist you, ignore you, punish you? Or would it try to recapture you with new incentives, new comforts, new patterns? This is why understanding the architecture of control matters. Because once you see it, you can begin to resist it, not by fighting it directly, but by reclaiming your unpredictability, by becoming illegible to the system, by choosing, again and again, to act from a place that no data model can comprehend, the human soul. With the death of ambiguity, why society fears the unknowable, now we arrive at the heart of the matter, the death of ambiguity. If predictability is the tool of control, then ambiguity is its greatest threat. It's the crack in the system's mirror, the glitch in the code. Ambiguity resists labels, defies categories, and slips through the fingers of algorithms. And that's precisely why society fears it. Because to be ambiguous is to be unreadable, and unreadable people can't be managed. They can't be sold to, programmed, or easily defined. They walk through the world like questions rather than answers. And in a world that thrives on certainty, questions are deeply unsettling. Zygmunt Bauman understood this deeply. He knew that modernity, in its liquid state, doesn't just destabilize institutions, it destabilizes identities. But instead of embracing the fluidity of self, society reacts by imposing artificial clarity. You must be this or that, straight or gay, male or female, liberal or conservative, productive or lazy, successful or failing. You must pick a lane, and once you do, you must stay in it. Because lanes are easy to track, categories are easy to monetize, But what happens when someone refuses to be defined? Ambiguity is not indecision. It's not confusion. It's not weakness. It's expansion. It's the refusal to be reduced to a single narrative. And that refusal is powerful. It's threatening. Because when you live ambiguously, when you allow yourself to contain contradictions, to evolve in public, to not always make sense, you become something society can't use. You stop being a product. You stop being a role. You become a possibility. And possibilities are dangerous. Let me ask you something you may have never dared to ask yourself. What if you don't need to be understandable to be worthy? What if your complexity is not a flaw, but your deepest source of power? Think about how often we're told to find ourselves, as if the self is a fixed object waiting to be uncovered. But what if the self isn't a noun at all? What if it's a verb, a process, a becoming, a dance between identities, experiences, and contradictions? In this view, predictability is a kind of death. It freezes you. But ambiguity is life. It's motion. It's freedom. But freedom isn't comfortable. It's not neat. And that's why society, despite its claims to value individuality, often punishes those who live ambiguously. The punishment is subtle. It comes in the form of exclusion, misunderstanding, alienation. But people will say, "I just don't get you." Or worse, "You've changed." As if change is betrayal. As if evolution is a threat. But maybe that's exactly what it is, a threat to a system that depends on you being static. Bauman described modern life as being obsessed with clarity and control. We want everything neatly labeled, from the food we eat to the people we date. But life doesn't work that way. The soul doesn't work that way. The most beautiful things in existence, love, meaning, truth, are ambiguous by nature. They can't be fully known. They can only be experienced. And yet, we try to reduce them to bite-sized content, to metrics, to identities. What we lose in that reduction is nothing less than our humanity. Ambiguity, then, is a deeply philosophical stance. It says, "I will not be reduced." It says, "I am not here to be understood, I am here to be." And in being, fully and uncomfortably, we begin to reclaim our agency. That agency doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it looks like silence, or softness, or choosing not to define yourself at all. And in that refusal, you become powerful. You become ungovernable. This is why Bauman's work is so vital today, because it gives us the language to understand our discomfort. It reveals the invisible pressure we all feel to be known, to be clear, to be legible. And it invites us to resist, not through violence or outrage, but through ambiguity, through the radical act of being too complex to be predicted. So here's a question that might unsettle you. What parts of yourself have you killed in order to be understood? Was it your creativity, your anger, your contradictions, your queerness, your doubt? And what would it mean to resurrect those parts not as problems to solve, but as truths to honor? We live in a time when ambiguity is more necessary than ever. Artificial intelligence, surveillance capitalism, algorithmic governance, these systems don't just manage behavior, they depend on clarity. They need you to be consistent. But your soul doesn't owe consistency to a machine. Your soul owes itself only truth, and truth is almost always ambiguous, becoming illegible. How to reclaim freedom in a predictable world. So here we are. You've walked with me through the mechanics of predictability, the architecture of control, and the death of ambiguity. Now we stand at the edge of a deeper, more urgent question: what do we do with all this? What does it mean, in real and practical terms, to break free? To live a life that's not dictated by algorithms, not confined by categories, not reduced to patterns. How do we become illegible not as an act of rebellion for its own sake, but as an act of liberation? To become illegible is to become sovereign. It's to reclaim the right to define yourself on your own terms, even if those terms change tomorrow. It is to move through the world like a wave instead of a line, to stop thinking in binaries and to start living in gradients. It's not about being chaotic or irrational. It's about being uncontainable. It's about being something the system cannot fully grasp and therefore cannot fully use. Zygmunt Bauman never provided a clear roadmap to freedom because in a liquid world, no such roadmap exists. But he gave us clues. He spoke of the need for ethical living in a world that constantly dissolves meaning. He spoke of the importance of dialogue, of uncertainty, of vulnerability. And most importantly, he showed us that freedom isn't about escaping systems, it's about navigating them without losing yourself. You don't need to burn it all down to be free. You just need to stop believing that your value lies in your predictability. Here's a radical idea. Maybe your unpredictability isn't a threat to society, it's a gift. Maybe, in a world addicted to certainty, the most generous thing you can offer is your mystery, your refusal to be a statistic, your ability to act from the soul rather than the script. That's not just a personal rebellion, it's a philosophical revolution. But how do we live this? How do we practice ambiguity and illegibility in a world that constantly rewards the opposite? Start small. Interrupt your patterns. Take a different route to work. Say something out loud that you usually keep inside. Change your opinion publicly. Do something kind without posting about it. Engage in a conversation where you don't try to win, but simply to understand. These may sound like trivial actions, but they are subversive. Because every time you act unpredictably, you're reminding yourself and the world that you are not a machine. You are not a brand. You are not a role. You are a living, breathing, evolving human being. And here's the truth most systems hope you never realize: unpredictability is contagious. When one person breaks the script, others begin to question theirs. When you live freely, others feel permission to do the same. That's the real danger. Not that you'll drop out of society, but that you'll change it not with force, but with presence, with complexity, with ambiguity. So let me ask you one last question, the kind that stays with you long after the video ends. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be understood and started trying to be true? What would happen if you let go of the need to be consistent and instead committed to being alive? Not safe, not efficient, but alive. Bauman taught us to see the liquid nature of the world, not to fear it, but to learn how to float. He reminded us that in a society obsessed with clarity, choosing to remain a mystery is an act of courage. Choosing to evolve is an act of defiance. Choosing to say, "I don't fit your pattern, and I never will," is the beginning of real freedom. You don't owe the world your legibility. You don't owe the algorithm your consistency. You don't owe the market your identity. You owe yourself your humanity. And that means allowing yourself to surprise even you. So the next time the world tries to box you in, to simplify you, to predict you, smile. Because unpredictability is not failure. It's power. It's the soul's way of saying, I am not finished yet, and neither are you. Thank you for watching. Now go out there and live a life so unpredictable, no system can ever contain it.